As far back as 1912, the University of California at Berkeley set up what they refer to as a research corporation, which was an independent non-profit organization that filed and licensed patents on behalf of faculty and universities. In 1924, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation was formed to facilitate technology licensing from the University of Wisconsin. And I'm going to be dwelling very much on that transition from research to licensing, patenting in order to advance commercial fortunes of countries, rather than the performance of pure research per se. In 1932, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology established a patent policy. And at this stage, the approach was mostly passive. And over time, it evolved to active invention administration, with the function being active by 1946. And this thinking was influenced significantly by the research corporation that I had referred to earlier at Berkeley. In 1945, the CSIR was established as an organization, as an institution. So it started life immediately, at the end of the Second World War. And the first sentence of the outline of the objects and policy of the CSIR was that this is the century of applied science, of the application of the results of laboratory research to every activity of mankind. So from the very outset, the intention with the establishment of the CSIR was not simply to conduct research as might be conducted in an academic institution at a university, but actively to seek to advance, to promote through the application of science those results in such a manner as to have an influence on the economy, on industry in the country. And Sir Basil Shonland was the first president, chairman and chief executive officer of the CSIR. He was very well known for his research into lightning and contribution to the development of radar during World War II. And indeed, much of the work that was conducted then by CSIR was on the radar. And even today, that's one of the areas of strongest competence in the organization. In 1948, the National Research Development Corporation was established in the UK to exploit inventions from publicly funded research and development. So in NRDC, the equivalent was established in India in 1953. In 1951, the first reporting of licensing activity in the CSIR's annual report. In a new section which was referred to as Discovery and Invention, and it begins to mention license agreements and so on. And there was a license agreement, South African firms, in this particular case, South African firm, which was to deliver the first 2 trial models of a crystal-controlled radio receiver based on work that was done by Mr. Trevor Watley, who was a CSIR, actually a joint scientist who worked both at CSIR and, if I recall correctly, at WITS. And there he is over there fiddling with what was referred to as the crystal-controlled communications receiver. This was a great advance at the time in the world of communications. And in fact, this particular advance, together with another one associated with it, what was absolutely fundamental to the commercial fortunes of CSIR. Now, in 1956, the very first startup company based on CSIR technology was established as a private firm to develop under license a novel means of distance measurement involving the use of an instrument referred to as the tellurometer. This instrument was invented by the same man, Trevor Watley. What that device actually was, it was a device to measure distances between, say, one mountain and another. You simply send a signal, it gets reflected, it comes back, and from the time of flight, you can work out what the distance is between the one point and the other, for purposes of cartography and so on and so forth. So hence the name tellurometer, from the word tellus for Earth, a measurement of distances on Earth, using what is referred to as microwave technology, which is simply a mechanism for carrying signal. And this technology was in fact, but it was not to be known to Trevor Watley at the time, is exactly the same technology that we use today to transmit wireless signals. When you make a phone call, Ultimately, what happens is that your signal gets transmitted from one mast to the next via the use of a microwave signal to carry it, ultimately perhaps to a telecom backbone and so on. But at that time, this is not what was envisaged, because after all, cellular communications is a much more recent phenomenon. But ultimately, for those who may not know, the technology behind the backbone network for wireless telecommunications was invented here in South Africa, and only subsequently adopted by other countries, such as Ericsson and so on and so forth. Now, as far back as 1957, a patent division was formed at CSIR. Now, it so happens that, as it happens, although we speak often as if this kind of thing had not happened before, that a lot of these ideas are new, the reality is that, in fact, CSIR was one of the very first in the world to pursue actively such commercial opportunity from the research activity, and forming a patent office as far back as 1957. And indeed, introducing a gap fund or a seed fund for promoting and using the income from patent licenses to support further development and so on. Something that we still continue, we talk about as a challenge in our pursuit of commercial opportunity for the work that we do. And as it says, in securing the commercial exploitation of CSIR inventions through patent licensing, priority was given to South African firms in order to create new manufacturing priorities for local industry. So the intention was indeed to promote local industry, to promote companies, to promote, to stimulate the health of the business sector in South Africa. Yeah, so a company was then formed, which was run by that gentleman over there, in order to promote the further development of patent exploitation, not just at CSIR, but amongst other countries and in South Africa in general. And this was the Inventions and Development Division, and which performed a variety of functions, as I've indicated, extending beyond the filing of patents to do techno-economic assessments and coordination of further research and development, and indeed to handle infringements. Because once you play in this game, you learn very quickly that the world is unforgiving. It infringes and it depends, and simply makes use of your patent without paying royalties. And it's up to you to pursue your rights, and internationally it can become very difficult. And in 1962, there was a South African Inventions Development Corporation that was formed. The intention then was to not restrict this expertise to CSIR, but to extend it to all science councils, as well as to universities, so that IP that comes from the various institutions can then be suitably exploited. And the focus was very strongly, this is from an annual report of 62, that it said it should be stressed that the value of the corporation's work to the country should be the guiding factor in its operations, i.e. focus on the desired impact, formation of new companies. The same language that we use today. So really, conceptually, there isn't much that is new. The question is, how well are we doing, and what are the new things that we ought to be thinking of doing? There was even mention as far back as 1964 of a royalty-free license to South African firms in the public interest. In other words, one should not simply try to seek maximum commercial gain for oneself when one seeks to commercialize, but there may be instances where you may want to not demand royalties for the use of your invention, your patent, and so on. What we often, in the software context these days, refer to as open source, and so on and so forth. So that thinking, the terminology was different, but the thinking certainly was in place. It was only in 1970 that Stanford and Cambridge set up their own technology and transfer offices. So Stanford started a pilot technology transfer program, and Cambridge University established what is now known as Wilson Industrial Liaison Office. In 74, only in 74, that in the US, a Federal Laboratory Consortium for Technology Transfer was established to facilitate technology transfer from various federal labs in the USA, i.e. the equivalent of your CSIRs and various other labs. Harvard, only in 1976, established a technology licensing office, fairly recently. 1988, I'm approaching the end of my timeline now. Technofin, which is a venture capital company, was established by the CSIR and ITC as a 50-50 partnership. And it is now, ITC subsequently, for a variety of reasons, pulled out and is 100% owned by CSIR, but it continues to be a major vehicle for the commercialization of CSIR technologies. Only in 2008, was an IPR Act, Intellectual Property Rights from Publicly Financed Research and Development, was it promulgated, requiring all public R&D institutions in South Africa to establish a technology transfer office. The CSIR total royalties earned from 1955 to 2013 is approximately 500 million rand. Average royalty rate of 3%. This translates to, I guess, well, one might question this figure, but 16.7 billion rand of direct economic activity. But the lithium battery story has to do with the fact that all of you have got these devices here. They use a battery, and so does this, the computer I'm standing in front of. Typically lithium-ion battery, and the lithium-ion battery was in fact at least one aspect of it, using a particular chemistry developed and patented by CSIR, and the patent is still valid. However, this is when you learn how difficult it is to play in the world, to take a global patent, and immediately what happens is that the big players, and I'm talking about seriously big players, you name any big player you can think of in Japan in this game, and they infringe. People infringe because you are a small outfit sitting in, at the tip of Africa, and what are the chances that you are going to sue and to assert your rights? And it's actually extremely difficult. In the case of our sister institution, CSIRO, in Australia, you may not know that what is referred to as Wi-Fi, the protocol for wireless communication amongst these various devices. The protocols for doing this were actually developed at CSIRO, and it is in fact in the Wi-Fi standard that royalties are payable to CSIRO. But what then happens is that, once again, companies infringe and they didn't pay. They didn't pay CSIRO any royalties for a very long time, until they pursued their rights by going and suing in the US and paying a lot of money, in excess of $80 million just to try and assert their rights. In that particular case, they won the case, and the companies paid back royalties, and they've had a windfall and done very well out of that. But some of the things that occupy my mind, for example, as CEO of CSIR, is when I see this sort of thing, and I see some royalties come in, but I know it can be 10 times, several times that much, if I simply went and asserted my rights and sued. And typically you sue in the US, and you have to choose a state. You don't go and sue in California, because you are not going to get anywhere. You go and sue in a friendlier state like it is known, you go and sue in Texas. You're much more likely to win. But you have to spend a lot of money, and you might not actually win. And I'm governed by the Public Finance Management Act, and that soon be accused of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So I do not pursue those rights. And these are some of the contradictions and difficulties that we need to think about very carefully as we promote people, institutions, to move beyond research, to promote the formation of industries. That there's a lot else that is involved that goes way beyond the simple exercise, for example, of registering. Just registering a patent and keeping it alive is extremely expensive.